It's never been better to be Lane Kiffin. And there's been a lot of times where it's been real good to be Lane Kiffin. The Joey Freshwater days, if you know, you know. The times he was the head coach at Tennessee and USC and the Oakland Raiders before he was 40 years old. He is the head coach at Ole Miss and has the Rebs at heights kind of previously unseen before. It's a great time to be Lane Kiffin, and it's only going to get better because Lane Kiffin's going to make about $15 million a year starting next season. Whether that's at Ole Miss, at Florida, or LSU, Lane Kiffin is going to make a lot of money because of those openings in the Southeastern Conference, and everybody being pretty aware of the fact that Florida and LSU are better jobs than Ole Miss is. Whether it's recruiting base, whether it's, and it's true now for Florida, it wasn't before Billy Napier got there. It's true in facilities. It's true in money. LSU and Florida are better jobs than Ole Miss. And the longer that Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, the more everybody is itching to get him out of there. The more everybody thinks it's logical that this is going to be the job that he's going to jump for, because he hasn't jumped quite yet. Didn't entertain, whether it was from him, from them, or both, replacing Nick Saban at Alabama. There have been other opportunities that people thought this is a natural fit for Lane Kiffin. And it hasn't happened yet. Auburn hasn't happened yet. And the idea is, well, he can say no to Auburn. Can he say no to Florida? Can he say no to LSU? We're going to get answers to those questions. But if Lane Kiffin is happy in Oxford, Mississippi, he's going to stay there. And he's going to make fat stacks of cash because Ole Miss is going to have to pony up at least a little bit, because Lane Kiffin and his representation ain't dumb. They can say, hey, you know what? We're getting 15 from LSU or Florida. Can you hit us with 12? And we'll stay. Yep. All right. Appreciate it. And Lane Kiffin's not alone in this either, because Dan Lanning is going to be in somewhat the same boat. Is every time a high-profile job in the SEC opens up, whether it's going to be Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee probably, Dan Lanning's name's going to be attached to it because, one, we have seen Oregon become a place where guys are willing to leave, which had not always been true before. Because, well, that's a different discussion for a different day. And also, because there's this narrative that I don't necessarily understand, by the way, that Dan Lanning is an SEC guy. Yes, he was a coordinator at Georgia. But Dan Lanning is from Missouri. He has as much history coaching on the West Coast before Oregon as he did coaching in the SEC. Now, part of that is you get your rise to fame because you were the defensive coordinator of very fine defenses at Georgia. And so that's where people associate you with. But I also think there's part of the well, there's just so much money in the SEC. It just means more, etc. Dan Lanning makes a lot of money at Oregon. And as long as we are in the NIL era of college football, and as long as Phil Knight is alive, Oregon is as good of a job as plenty of SEC jobs. So I don't necessarily understand every time this happens, there's going to be a conversation. Well, is Dan Lanning in play here? I don't think that's as natural as Lane Kiffin being in play at places like Florida or potentially LSU. Now, as it comes to LSU, by the way, I think they, more than anybody, are in the line of thinking that they want the opposite of what they just had. And what they just had was an outsider who didn't understand the culture of the state, of the fan base, of the university, and of the football program. And I would venture to guess that the next person that becomes the head coach of the Tigers understands probably 3 out of the 4 of the state, the fan base, the university, and the program. It just feels natural that the next person is going to have ties, whether it be they are an alumni, whether it be they previously coached in the state, whether it be they previously served as an assistant at LSU, or in one current college game day analyst's situation, was formerly the head coach at LSU. I firmly believe that the next head coach of the Tigers will have LSU ties, because you always want the opposite of what you just got rid of, right? I crudely make this analogy that when you were in high school and you were dating a nice, stable girl who wouldn't let you go in her face, the next girlfriend that you wanted, you were kind of hoping, like, hey, maybe things are going to be a little easier in that department. And then you realize that she was a train wreck and just an absolute nightmare to be with. And you're like, I want stable and easygoing. And then you get that. And then it's spice things up a little bit. And it's the same thing in college coaching. For instance, Ohio State had Jim Tressel for a very long time, where the idea was the punt is one of the most important plays in all of football. And they immediately then go to Urban Meyer, who's like, I will rip out your jugular in the first quarter, and if you don't stop me, I'll drop 70 on your ass, and I won't feel a damn bit of worry about it. Because once things start to go sour, you kind of want the opposite of what you just had. And Brian Kelly, despite being, I think, a good football coach, did not fit the state of Louisiana, the state of the LSU football program, the fan base, the university. Because those people, and to their credit, this is absolutely 100% not a shot. This is a feature, not a bug. LSU fans do not put up with being used to further somebody else's career. Brian Kelly did not give a shit about anybody who wore purple and gold. He did not care about making that fan base memories, excitement, success, etc. Brian Kelly was there to enrich and empower Brian Kelly. And when that was the situation, LSU fans, to their credit, saw through it immediately. And a lot of them, I think, thought this isn't going to end well, but this is a guy who has a lot of history, and we will give him the opportunity to lead us forward. And the second that it went south, and they demanded that the plug be pulled, and it was. So I give them a lot of credit. They now want one of their own. They now want somebody who understands the state, the football program, the university, and the athletic department, and the fan base as a whole. I don't think they're off base for wanting that. I think you do have to kind of guard against what narrowing that search looks like, because everybody wants to see that return home story. It's in play at a lot of different places right now. For instance, at Michigan State, they are arguing, hey, we want Jonathan Smith fired, and we want Max Bullough to come back and be our head coach, despite the fact that he's got like 3 years of college football coaching experience and is now the linebackers coach at Notre Dame. We want him to come back and be our head coach and lead us to the promised land, which is probably not likely because he's still figuring out what the hell it means to be a position coach. Probably means he's not ready to be a head coach. But we want to see that return home storyline, that one of our prodigal sons came back, that was, whether they were a grinder in college and you just couldn't help but love them because you know they were a real student of the game, a real gym rat. and then they become your head coach, and they're going to be the one to lead you to the successes that you think you should be at because they understand our program. They understand what it means to wear our colors, to represent our university, our area, etc. I think you can really narrowcast sometimes and put yourself in a corner where there's only a few people that fit that box. And then if you're not successful, you look real stupid because you didn't have a real white shirt. You had blinders on and said, this is the archetype of the person that we're going to hire. And that doesn't always lead to success. So I would caution LSU fans who say, hey, it's got to be somebody with Cajun blood running through their veins. It's got to be somebody with ties to the Tigers. It's got to be somebody who understands us. Because I don't think it necessarily has to be that. I think those people can grow to understand the state of Louisiana, the LSU fan base, the football department, the football program, the athletic department, the university. I think you can learn that. The idea that, going back to an Ohio State analogy, that people in Ohio will tell you that Ryan Day doesn't understand the rivalry with Michigan because he's from New Hampshire. I think when people start telling you that they hope your children get decapitated, you probably understand the rivalry pretty quick. And I would imagine it's the same thing for whoever's going to be the next head coach of the LSU Tigers. The second that you don't win, you're not immediately successful to the level that people think you should be. I imagine that that's a pretty sobering situation to be in. It's pretty easy to confront we might be in over our heads here, or whatever the case may be. I think sometimes we don't give people enough credit for what they do deserve. But I think LSU fans who will tell you that the next coach has to either be an alumni, a former assistant coach, whatever. I would tell you, I think Lane Kiffin could be an amazing head coach of the LSU Tigers. I think that there are a lot of folks who would tell you that you can be successful as the head coach at LSU if you are there to help, even if you're mutually beneficially trying to empower each other. You're trying to increase the relevance and the precedent of each other rather than just what they had the last couple of years was somebody who was simply using the university, the football program, and those colors to try to enrich and empower themselves. It was not a match made in heaven. It went up in flames. And it's going to lead Lanning, Lane Kiffin, and hell, maybe even Nick Saban. Two of those three are going to make $15 million a year next year, either at LSU or at their current jobs. It's just a matter of time until we find out which one was which. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.